This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's June 5th, 2025. On this day in 1943, two Nashville institutions became intrinsically connected. It was the first time the Grand Ole Opry was performed at the Ryman Auditorium. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. The mother church of country music is older than the iconic show associated with it. The Grand Ole Opry began as a radio broadcast, performed in a small downtown studio in 1925. At that point, the Ryman had already been around for 33 years. It was built to hold large-scale church revival meetings. Its original name was the Union Gospel Tabernacle, although it actually opened with an orchestra concert in 1892. In the 1920s, the Ryman's general manager, a woman named Lula Clay Naff, started booking huge stars to perform in the space. It was the place that Nashvillians could go to see Charlie Chaplin in person. John Philip Sousa, Harry Houdini played there. And as jazz became a cultural phenomenon, she ignored the racial norms of the day to host performances by musicians like Duke Ellington and Charlie Parker. All of this was happening as the Opry, off in its own lane, grew from a bare-bones radio show to a true live event. Starting in the mid-30s, it bounced around from venue to venue, playing at what is now the Belcourt Theater, as well as East Nashville's Dixie Tabernacle and War Memorial Auditorium. And that last venue wasn't the best fit for the audience the Opry drew. If you've never been to a show in War Memorial, it's an elegant space adjacent to the state capitol building. The courtyard you walk through has a massive statue in the style of Grecian depictions of gods and heroes. The interior is marked with incredible Art Deco touches. The people who ran it expected audiences to behave in a way that aligned with that vibe. And they were not getting that from the Opry audience. So they kicked the show out because things regularly got too rowdy. But over at the Ryman, Lula Clay Neff said she didn't mind. Come on over to our side of downtown. And with that, the Opry moved into what would become known as its most iconic home, the Ryman Auditorium. Now, in retrospect, it seems like a no-brainer. The acoustics were great, of course, but also the pews could hold a big crowd, and Tootsie's Orchid Lounge was just across the alley from the stage door. The Opry stayed put for about 3 decades. The current Grand Ole Opry house was built in the 70s, and for a long while after that, the Ryman stood empty. That was the case until Emmylou Harris brought attention back to the old tabernacle by recording an album there in 1991. It wasn't until 94 that it reopened for real as a performance venue. Today, of course, it's thriving. And in the alley, on the opposite side of the building from Tootsie's, it's also become a space offering a particularly rare honor to just a handful of Opry members. Only a few have been memorialized in bronze statues there. Loretta Lynn, Bill Monroe, Little Jimmy Dickens, Charlie Pride. And this week, a new one was unveiled. George Jones has joined their ranks on the Ryman's Icon Walk. Last year, WPLN's Rose Gilbert went to the other side of the globe to gain a deeper understanding of one Nashville community. In just a few minutes, a conversation with Rose about the new podcast that came from her reporting trip to Kurdistan. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together, a themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The mayor of Rutherford County is speaking out against the county's assessor, Rob Mitchell, On Monday, the Tennessee Comptroller's Office said it examined a sample of properties evaluated by Mitchell, and it found that Mitchell's valuations were off by more than 11% on average. That's more than the 5% error rate the state considers acceptable. Rutherford County Mayor Joe Carr says he wants property taxpayers to be treated fairly and equitably. He added, quote, "I would not think it strange if Mr. Mitchell wanted to submit his resignation." Local organizing groups crowded Nashville's City Hall this week to see what they could get from the new city budget. Labor unions asked for pay raises. The Southern Movement Committee talked violence prevention. Stand Up Nashville launched their campaign for public land. But WPLN Cynthia Abrams reports one request came from many corners.
That request? Affordable housing. There were a lot of suggestions for how to address it, but the main ask had to do with the Barnes Housing Trust Fund. This is the city's go-to tool for increasing affordable housing by offering grants to nonprofit developers. And many people think it needs more money.
The Barnes Fund remains that crucial piece of financing that we can use to get across the finish line.
That's Carter Swayze, who works for an affordable housing developer.
And if I can't underwrite that grant money and that partnership with our nonprofits, it basically keeps us from proceeding with developing affordable housing.
Some groups also proposed creating another housing fund. Others advocated for support programs for homeless populations. And a number of speakers, like Darkenya Waller of the Legal Aid Society, asked for support for the Eviction Right to Counsel program, which provides free legal services to people facing an eviction.
We know that one of the best ways to promote affordable housing is to keep people in the homes that they already have. Many people walk away from their homes because they don't know they have the right to fight for what is theirs.
Now that residents have shared their wish lists, Nashville's Metro Council will work on alternatives to the mayor's budget, which could incorporate some of these requests. But the council will have to agree on a budget by the end of the month. Otherwise, the mayor's proposal will take effect. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Tennessee recently completed a 400-mile loop of electric vehicle chargers between three of Nashville's biggest cities. EV drivers can safely travel between Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and Cookeville, but federal funding cuts could put a stop to that. The Tennessee Lookout reports a federal program to expand the state's charging network, especially along the major interstates, was halted in February. The state has a goal to install an EV charger every 50 miles on Tennessee highways and interstates. The Rutherford County Library Board is backing down from an earlier decision to ban books on transgender topics. The Daily News Journal reports the turnaround comes after members were counseled that they would likely lose any First Amendment-based legal challenges. The board member who led the initial charge to remove the books from shelves is set to become the panel's new chairman. Cody York presented the book ban as a way of protecting children. He says he'll make a priority of crafting new policies to reach that goal when he assumes the leadership position next month. A new Tennessee law will tighten regulations on cannabis. Starting next year, hemp products will be banned unless they contain 0.3% or less of THC, the chemical that gets people high. Artificial cannabinoids and other substitutes for THC will be banned completely. Governor Bill Lee has signed the bill into law. It will also forbid direct-to-consumer sales, meaning no buying hemp online. Plus, it prohibits marketing that features unicorns, superheroes, and other kid-friendly images. Marijuana, which is hemp's stronger cousin made from the same plant, is already banned in Tennessee, though there are some limited exceptions for medical use. The next big thing in record manufacturing could be color-changing vinyl. Music reporter Justin Barney is at the Making Vinyl conference in Memphis. He reports the first color-changing records could hit shelves as early as this fall.
Colored vinyl, splattered, and liquid-filled vinyl are favorites among record collectors. And John Wadle from Vinyl Makers Plastic M says that they're working on something very special.
The idea is we want a black record with a needle going on with a white comet tail following it. It's like a shooting star. So that's where we're at the minute. The comet tail, that's really difficult, but we're hoping to have something out end of September, hopefully.
Variants like splatter and glow-in-the-dark vinyl have been around for years, but he says that they have one fatal flaw.
It sounded rubbish. The surface noise on it was pretty horrible.
Plastic M fixed that by reducing the size of the PVC particulate that makes a record, and so now even records that look different sound exactly the same.
The music industry, it's all about artists, and everyone wants to have something different. We're just pulling out these records to show them what's possible.
Plasticam is looking into making eco-sustainable vinyl next. Justin Barney, WPLN News.
A new drug for urinary tract infections may very well become the first to treat the condition. It was developed by a biochemistry professor at Vanderbilt University. The groundbreaking treatment is a synthetic drug in tablet form. According to Vanderbilt, it is the first new class of antibiotics to be approved in decades. It will be manufactured by GlaxoSmithKline under the brand name Bluyeppa. UTIs send more than 8 million people to the hospital. The illness commonly results in a bladder infection that can turn into a more serious kidney infection. Trials suggest the medication may also be effective against gonorrhea. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The story of how Nashville became home to the largest Kurdish diaspora in America is an epic one. As WPLN reporter Rose Gilbert writes in her new podcast, out today, it's a story of bloody genocide, of freedom fighters, and above all, stunning perseverance. The new podcast is called The Country in Our Hearts, and Rose is here to tell us more. Hi, Rose.
Hi, Nina.
Rose, the title of the show is so evocative. Can you tell me where it came from and what inspired it?
Yes. Well, while covering the Kurdish community here in Nashville, talking to people, doing historical research, one thing I learned very quickly is that a defining part of Kurdish identity is this dream of and struggle for a united, autonomous Kurdistan, or at the very least, an autonomous one. Because Kurdistan is not a country. It's split across Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, and Kurdish people have their own difficult history in each of those places. So as one person I spoke to told me, in every Kurd lives a Kurdistan. It's a country that lives in the hearts of its people.
Well, you went all the way to the geographic Kurdistan to report this story, which is a first for WPLN. Tell me about why it was so important to go there, and how does the show reflect that?
Well, the first 2 episodes are set almost entirely in Kurdistan, and it was important because the land is such a big part of this story. Land that was fought over for decades. Just talking to people, they talk to me about the connection they feel eating food grown in their family's land. It's not uncommon for people in Nashville to ask that their bodies be sent back to their home village in Kurdistan to be buried. There's a Kurdish saying, no friends but the mountains. And that refers to this idea that the mountains have acted as this natural defense for Kurdish people and for the Kurdish fighters known as the Peshmerga for decades and centuries. So I think all of that gives you an idea of how important the actual physical landscape is to this story and why it was so wonderful to be able to go there in person.
So your story focuses mainly on one family, and that's a family that fled Kurdistan for good in 1988 and wound up here in Nashville, part of the refugee resettlement program.
Yes, and to give a little context, that's not even the first time they had to flee their home. There had been this years-long Kurdish rebellion in Iraq, and anyone who was connected to it was pretty much on the run for decades afterwards. So this family that I reported on fled many times before finally coming to America, and we tell that saga in the show.
Okay, let's play a little excerpt from the show. Rose, can you tell us what we're going to hear?
Yeah, so I spoke to Nash Chalke, who owns a market in South Nashville. That market is where I first met him and where he first told me his family story.
Actually, I was 6 months old and we had to run.
It was 1976 and the Iraqi army had come to Chalke, hunting down Kurdish freedom fighters known as Peshmerga, which included Nash's father.
So my dad, he was one of the Peshmergas that literally was on a list, for them to catch. He was a warrior.
Everyone had to drop what they were doing, cooking, tending to the crops, laundry, and flee for cover. It was chaos.
My mom tells me the stories that I fell from her hand. So she literally left me behind. Some other people had to catch me and bring me. But
they ended up fleeing to Turkey. It was the beginning of a childhood on the run.
Somebody would just shout, hey, helicopters, and, everybody would just, we would just knew exactly, it was an instinct thing. Everybody knew how to hide.
By the time Nash was 12 years old, his family had fled some 20 times. and somehow they always found a way to regroup and return to Chalke. But all that changed in the summer of 1988. That was the year Nash and his family, and tens of thousands of other Kurds, fled their homeland for good.
So as I start to hint at there, 1988 was a landmark year in Kurdish history, especially in Iraq. A pretty terrible year, and one that came up over and over again in my conversations with people here in Nashville and in Kurdistan, to the point that hashte, or 88, was actually one of the first words I learned in Kurdish.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because that was the year of Saddam Hussein's Al-Anfal campaign, which was pretty much just a series of war crimes against the Kurds. And while I was in Kurdistan, I had the chance to visit some of the sites related to that year and speak to survivors about what that year was like, but also why it stands out even against other periods of conflict or difficult times in Kurdish history.
So how much time does this show span? I mean, it sounds like you're covering a lot of ground here.
Yes, it really goes from the 1970s all the way up to the current day, where I report on a new wave of Kurdish migration to America and to Nashville, this time people fleeing from Turkey.
Rose, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina.
You can listen to The Country in Our Hearts at WPLN.org/Kurdistan or wherever you get your podcasts. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.